Hi everybody, I'm Jeff.
And I'm Linda.
Welcome to the Paranormal Pub Table, where we talk about the paranormal at a pub table. So today we're going to talk about something that is the subject of controversy, debate, intrigue, fascination for paranormal investigators, amateur ghost hunters,
Yes.
anyone who does anything paranormal related.
Right.
Photographic evidence.
Yes.
Okay, now photographic evidence is an interesting thing because a lot of times you take pictures and some unexplainable things come up in those pictures.
Right.
And you wonder, did I catch something paranormal, or could there possibly be a natural explanation for what I caught in the photo?
Right.
And I got to say that we get a lot of photo submissions
We do.
through Facebook,
Yes.
through Instagram, various social media websites, and our personal website as well, of people asking us if they caught something paranormal in their photos.
Right.
Very often, the photos are related to orbs.
Yes.
Sometimes there's other anomalies in the photos.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, there are instances where a photo genuinely has something paranormal in it, something that can't be explained. We have a couple photos that even expert photographers took a look at and said, I can't explain what is in that photo. Looks like you
Right.
caught something interesting there that I can't
Yes.
really
Can't be
recreate or
explained by
explain.
science, yes.
Right, explain by science. So today we're going to show you a couple examples and talk about some of the things that you may consider to be paranormal, and are they really paranormal?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Now, the first topic
Mhm.
that we're going to talk about is
That's going to be lens reflection.
lens reflection. Okay, so let's take a look at our first picture here. Now, this picture that we're looking at was taken in Yorktown, Virginia, at a place called Crawford Road.
Right.
And when we first saw this picture, it was a couple years ago, someone looked at it and said, that's a UFO.
Right.
And if you
Right.
look at this, it does look like a UFO in the picture.
It does. It does.
But it's not.
No, absolutely not.
What is the explanation for this?
Well, with modern digital cameras, there's often the effect where you can pick up circles of light or different shapes of light, sometimes different colors, within the photograph. And what this is a very bright object or a very reflective surface within the field of view of the camera lens. And it is reflecting light into the camera and oftentimes off of one of the internal surfaces within the camera. So these things can be different shapes, different sizes. The way that you can tell is usually if you take two photographs back to back and you keep the camera in the same exact spot both times, this one strange anomaly of light will often appear in both photographs. So then you know it's something reflecting into the camera and causing this to occur.
Yeah, definitely an interesting picture. And one thing I can say is when I really saw this for the first time in person, I think I was, it was in some supposedly haunted city,
Right.
maybe Old Town Portsmouth or something like
Yes,
that,
yes.
wandering around at night. And I went to take a picture of one of the old buildings, and when I lifted the camera up, I saw it there in the viewfinder.
Yes.
It didn't actually have to get captured in the picture,
picture.
but I could actually see this moon reflection,
Right.
created the moon creating this green and blue reflection
Yeah.
through the lens, and wherever I moved it, it looked like a little UFO floating around there because the glare would kind of move with the camera.
Yeah.
But you could clearly tell it was a glare if you just look out of the viewfinder.
Right. Exactly.
You know.
Yes.
So, definitely an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Now, our next topic that we're going to talk about, our next anomaly that's caught in a photo,
Right.
is what?
Orbs.
Orbs.
Yes.
Now, orbs are a big deal, right? Orbs are one of the most common things that are shown
As evidence?
as evidence.
Right.
Right. And they show up a lot in a lot of pictures.
They do.
Almost everyone catches orbs in their pictures
Absolutely.
at one time or another.
Yes, unfortunately, it's one of those things that is very highly debated. A lot of people that have extensive knowledge about digital photography can explain about 99% of the orbs that you see in photographs. Other people, psychics, mediums, things of that nature will say, well, I can cause orbs to appear on command in front of me, in front of the camera. I can will them to appear. They often go to the fact that different orbs have different colors associated with them, and you can find extensive lists online about what these colors of these orbs are supposed to mean. So it's a very highly debated thing.
So, to clarify, are there pictures that do have orbs that are of a paranormal nature?
Yes, there actually are. Like I said, about 99% of orbs, or what they call AOIs, which is kind of a cool thing, anomalous orbic images, can be explained by science, by digital photography, and but there is a small percentage of photographs that cannot be explained as well. There was one that was taken. It was actually an infrared video surveillance system that caught this orb. On the BBC channel. It was a show that they had that the orb came into the picture, and you can see it coming across, and then it just sort of disappears. Now, the fact that this was a infrared photography or videography that was taken, it suggests that there was no real explanation from the reflective surfaces. There were none in the picture. There was no possibility that it could be the light from a flash reflecting off of an orb, like so many of them are, reflecting off dust, reflecting off water particles and pollen and things like that you see floating in the air. So this one was one that could not be explained.
Interesting. Well, let's take a look at a picture here. This picture was taken at Fort Mifflin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it's quite an interesting picture, as it shows a little bit of a variety of orbs, right?
Yes.
Now, the first thing that our attention is brought to, most likely, is the bright, I don't know if you'd call it an orb, down at the bottom of the doorway.
Speck of light. Yeah, speck of light.
Now, that's clearly a bug.
It definitely is.
Right.
Yes.
And I've seen people show pictures like this and try to pass it off as a fairy.
Right, absolutely. But if you zoom in on the picture, you can actually see the details of the bug quite clearly. You can see its antennas, so, I mean, it's definitely not a fairy. It's when you're analyzing things like this, pictures with orbs or with other light anomalies that you don't really understand or can't really explain, it's most likely the most logical excuse.
Right.
You can't say fairies is definitely the most logical, thing that it could be. But most often bugs like this are caught, and they reflect very well, reflect the light from the flash of a camera.
Right.
And it'll make them look like they're sitting perfectly still, or sometimes they have a little bit of a trail behind them.
And we can see another bug up near the top of the doorway, of course.
Yes.
That's another bug, the other bright orb. And in actually looking out the door, you can see a circular orb right there that's a lot more faded, faint than the bugs.
Right.
What kind of orb would that be?
That is most likely going to be a water particle. Now, it could be dust. One of the things that is worth mentioning here is that there were 2 studies done that you can find online. And one of them is called the Orbs study of 2005 by the University of Arizona. And this was a study done by Gary E. Schwartz and Catherine Creeth. Now, they got together and decided that they were going to explain the photography, what they called the AOIs, the anomalous orbic images that you caught in digital photography. And this showing right here is a perfect example of what is probably a dust or a water particle. And even though it appears that this orb is out the doorway, the light from the flash on the camera is actually reflecting off of a particle that is very close to the camera.
Oh, I see.
It's
I see.
very,
So it's not
very
actually
close.
outside of the building.
No, this is actually very close to the camera. I'd venture to say within a couple of inches of the camera
Right.
lens.
Now, one other thing I notice is that red light over
Yes.
behind the doorway there. What is that?
I'm not sure, but I think that it was a piece of reflective tape
Oh,
that was
okay.
stuck to the wall behind the door.
That makes sense.
Yes, and the flash on the camera is just picking that up and reflecting off of that tape.
So one thing that's interesting in that picture is I know you've mentioned before that when an orb is partially concealed
Right.
by another object,
Yes.
it's more likely of a paranormal nature.
Exactly.
So when we looked at that orb that was in the doorway, that was actually up close to the camera.
Right.
But if the orb was that big, and let's say it was kind of peeking around the door,
Right.
that would be a huge water particle to be that far away.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because
Yes.
this one that we were looking at there was about inches away from the camera.
Right, definitely. And sometimes looks can be deceiving as well, because you can look at a photograph and you can think that a faint orb, such as the one we just showed, is partially obscured behind something. But only by zooming in very close to the orb can you see that the orb is actually slightly in front of the background
Because
surface.
of the transparency
Right.
of the orb.
Sometimes they
makes it
appear to
difficult.
be, behind, but they're still actually in front of the object. So,
see.
and this particularly happens with objects that are lighter. If it's against a very bright, let's say the white trim around the outside of a door, and if this is often a white form or a whitish gray sort of orb, you're not going to really see it much,
Right.
where that edge overlaps. So you have to be very careful. It's not, sometimes looks are very deceiving.
Interesting.
Yes.
We're going to pull up another picture here
Mhm.
that is also from Fort Mifflin. What are we looking at here? This looks like the old Citadel, right?
Yes.
At Fort Mifflin.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, safe to say, a plethora of orbs in front of this picture.
Absolutely.
Now, the brightly colored ones. Let's start with those because the bright ones are the ones that, of course, first draw your attention.
Right, absolutely. Those are most likely bugs. They could still be water particles or dust particles or things of that nature. But what's happening in this photograph is something that we often see. If you look very closely at what we were focusing on, it's sort of out of focus and a little bit fuzzy.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is that the camera is detecting that there are bugs or dust or water particles in front of what the camera is intended on being focused on, and it's actually focusing on those.
Right.
So
right.
when you snap the photograph, the light is reflecting off of those, the camera is focusing off of those instead of the object that you're trying to photograph behind it. But these smaller particles are most likely bugs. In the
Right,
distance
and then
that you
the
can see.
faint ones, the transparent ones, are most likely water particles.
Right, absolutely, yes.
Now, when we look at a picture like that with all those water particles, it was not raining.
No,
Right.
it was not. However, it was very humid.
Yes.
Very
So
humid.
not just rain can cause these water particles, but also humidity.
Yes.
It's just simply moisture in the air. We may not be able to see it or reach out and touch it,
Right.
but nonetheless, it's there in the air, and these particles are so close to the camera
Yes.
that it's actually locking in on those particles.
Absolutely.
Now, you told me something earlier about it could also have to do with the quality of the camera.
Of the camera, yes.
Right.
Yes. Cameras that are not quite as high end, that are a lower quality, often ones that have a lower resolution to them, will cause you to have a lot more particles, orbs that appear, AOIs that appear in your images, than the higher end cameras. Now, different cameras also have different shapes to their aperture, which is a slight opening inside the camera. And some of these are circular, spherical. The aperture in a Canon, which is what we use, is spherical. So most of the orbs that we catch in that camera are going to be perfect circles. Now they can appear to be oblong as well, like an oval, and this usually occurs when the light source that is reflecting off the internal parts inside the camera is at a very sharp angle to the camera lens itself. So the makeup of the camera, the way it's constructed, has a lot to do with it. A lot to do with it.
Interesting. In the older cameras, they didn't get them as much because the flash was farther away from the actual.
Right. That is the problem with the compact cameras that we see nowadays. Older cameras were not quite so compact. The flash was further away from the lens itself. Same thing with the DSLR cameras that are available nowadays. The flash is often up above the camera body itself.
Right.
Right. And it has to do with the relationship between the flash and the lens itself as to where these, how many particles you actually catch.
Interesting. We're going to pull up one more orb picture. Now this picture was taken at the Ferry Plantation down in Virginia Beach, which is an old plantation house.
Right.
Also very haunted.
Yes.
And as you can see, once again, there's somewhat of a variety of orbs. If we look right above that window on the right, to the right of the team, there is a very bright orb.
Yes.
And then over to the left, on the left side of the picture, there's some more faint orbs. That bright orb, why would a water particle sometimes appear so bright, but other times appear so faint?
Well, a lot of times that has to do with the distance of the particle from the lens and from the flash itself. Oftentimes, if it's right in front of the camera, right there, boom, it's going to reflect the light a lot more. And it could also have to do with the particle itself. This may not be a water particle. It may be something else that's floating in the air. It could be pollen, depending on the time of year that it is. It could also be a dust mote floating through the air as well.
Right.
So
right.
Solid objects will often reflect more light than something like a water particle. So.
Right. Now this picture was taken on a summer day with a far different VAPI team than we see now.
Yes.
It was quite a few years ago.
Yes.
But one thing I want to point out in this picture, when you're looking at a picture, sometimes we're so caught up with looking at the orbs that we miss some evidence that might be right in front of our faces.
Right.
Let's zoom in on this lower left window right here. Now if you take a look in the bottom left corner of this window, it almost appears to be a little boy's face peering outside of the window.
Right.
Now at the time this picture was taken, no one else was in the Ferry Plantation. The whole team, including our hostess, were all outside.
Right.
So there should be no one in there looking out that window.
Correct.
Possible evidence of paranormal activity.
Yes.
So I gotta say that picture, for the longest time, was one of my favorite pictures. There's been a handful of pictures. You'd think in all the years we've been investigating and all the places we've been to, we'd have all these cool pictures and everything. And we do have a lot of cool pictures.
Yes.
But there are very few that I genuinely can't explain.
Right.
And that picture's one of them. I mean, when I zoomed in on that picture, I always look in the windows to see if anything's looking out or
Yes.
to see if there's any faces in the windows. And that caught my eye immediately.
Right.
And of course, I remain somewhat skeptical of anything that we see in a window.
Absolutely.
Because there is something called matrixing.
Yeah.
Pareidolia.
Pareidolia. Yes.
Where your brain takes a lot of noise. Be it sometimes it happens with sound.
Right.
Sometimes it happens with an image where there's a lot of reflection in the window or something.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain will actually construct that into a logical image that looks like something.
Right.
It's kind of like when you're looking up at the clouds and you see a face in the clouds or you see a shape in the clouds. So is that possible with that picture? Well, yes. I mean, it is possible that there was something behind the window that was given that image.
Looking like a face. Yeah.
Looking like a face as it, cast the image through the glass and the way it was captured by the camera with the mixture of nighttime and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't notice it when we took the picture, obviously, or I would have gone in and further investigated. But we took several pictures out in front of the building there, and it's there in every picture, which is one thing that kind of concerns me about it. Would a ghost really be there in every picture? It could be, but at the same time, there's also a possibility that it could be something behind the window that's looking like that.
Right.
Another thing that happens is when you take a picture from outside of a window, especially if you have the flash on, especially if it's daylight, you can get all kinds of reflections in that window.
Right.
But sometimes there's something that looks almost too definite to be chalked up to matrixing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're going to take a look at a couple pictures here that involve faces and windows.
Yes.
Okay, so this picture here was taken at the White House of the Confederacy.
Yes,
in Richmond, Virginia.
Right.
Okay. And what do you see in this picture?
Well, basically what I see going on is in the lower section of the window, middle panes, second one from the bottom, you see half of what looks like an African American face peeking at you.
Yes, and I do see that. I do see exactly what you're talking about. This is one of those ones, without a doubt, whether it is matrixing, whether it is something causing that reflection, it's hard to say without actually being there, without actually further examining it, looking at what's exactly behind us.
Right.
The position that the picture's taken and everything else. But looking at it at first glance, I definitely see what looks to be that face peering out the window.
Right. And what is very interesting about this picture is the detail in the face. If you can look close enough, you can see the actual eye itself. You can see the white of the eye. You can see the iris of the eye and the pupil. You can see what looks like a bandana that this man is wearing on his head. And the edge, the bottom edge of the bandana, where it cuts across the forehead. You can see the side of the nose, and you can see what look like full lips on the man. So very detailed, very highly detailed face in this photograph. And it doesn't seem to me that this could possibly be caused by audio pareidolia or visual pareidolia, I should say.
Right.
In any way, shape, or form.
Interesting. Let's take a look at another picture here. Now this one is taken at the Swan Tavern.
Right.
Down in Yorktown, Virginia.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now you can see, let's zoom in a little bit on this window. You can see the whole Swan Tavern here.
Right.
And then up in the top we got to zoom in on the window.
Right.
What do you see in this window?
Well, basically, I see sort of a fuzzy white image that fills in a lot of the panes on this window. You can almost, in some of the panes, look and see what looks to be an arm on this gentleman and the body of the gentleman. But in one of those panes, if you look particularly close, you can see what looks like a portion, again, probably about half of this gentleman's face. And it appears that he has a beard.
Yes. Now, are you looking on the far right, about 4 panes up?
Yes, on the far right panes of glass, you can start to see in the second pane from the bottom what looks like the bottom of a shirt cuff with his hand.
Right, I do see that.
That pane leads up into the third from the bottom, which looks like a shoulder. And then as you go up a little bit further, you can see in the center section, the center column of panes there, fourth from the bottom, you can actually see what looks like half of the face.
That's interesting. And now, when you look, maybe just looking at this picture farther back, to the right of that center column where you see part of the face, I almost see like a face that's kind of cocked sideways. See with the eyes? The 2 eyes, the nose, and then it looks like his mouth is fading into a beard.
Are you looking fourth pane from the bottom on the far right?
Yes.
If you look in closely on that, it's actually a pretty scary image of a face. It sort of looks like zoomed in like a skeleton face.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's not often that you catch 2 things like that in one photograph, but we also have panes of glass here that are very old or that are made to look very old. They have somewhat of a ripply surface. Many old structures and old houses that have original or that have replicated glass panes will have this sort of ripply effect. And you have to sort of be careful. So I couldn't say that these are 100% not not pareidolia of any sort, but
Right.
still, the fact that these two faces sort of appear here, and particularly the one of the gentleman that looks like he has a beard, it almost looks like he has glasses on as well. There's quite a bit of detail to that face, so very interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and especially being that it's at the Swan Tavern, which is such a haunted location.
Right.
I mean, Yorktown itself has so many haunted locations.
It does.
This is where we plug Yorktown Ghost Walks. Make sure you check out YorktownGhostWalks.com.
Right.
Go down there, explore the dark side, and see more of these haunted locations, and maybe catch a picture for yourself.
Yes.
But, like you said, though, that ripply glass, it's in a lot of the old colonial buildings.
Right.
Whether it's Yorktown, Williamsburg,
Yes.
they put this old glass in there, and it's very hard to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, when you stand outside of that building and look at that building in person without even taking a picture of it,
Right.
it's almost like you can start matrixing right there,
Right.
just looking at it without even taking a picture.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, because the reflection of York Hall and the reflection of the stairs and the railings,
Yes.
and especially if there's any cars parked along the road, any people that are standing there, it's kind of like looking at a mirror in a funhouse.
It really is.
It really twists and turns everything.
It really is.
So we can't say for 100%, but definitely an interesting picture that we thought was worth sharing.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, talking about photographic evidence, whenever you're doing a paranormal investigation, the weather plays a huge factor. As we saw, you can get orbs if it's too humid, you can get orbs if it's just rained, if there's water particles in the air.
Yeah, reflective surfaces,
reflective surfaces.
bright light sources, yes.
Yes, if there's a lot of bugs outside during the warm months.
Yeah.
But one time of year that's particularly difficult is the winter time.
Right.
In the winter time, there are a few things you have to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
One of these things is a breath picture.
Yeah.
Now let's take a look at this first picture here. Now you might look at a picture like this and say, wow, this is some spiritual activity going on here.
Right.
This is crazy, right?
Yes.
No, it's not. This is actually a breath picture. I took this picture myself. I took this during a investigation of a UFO incident out in Louisa County, Virginia. And I did this just to demonstrate what breath would look like in a photograph on a cold day.
Right.
Okay, so this is one thing you got to be very careful for, because you may take it in one picture and it may not be there in the next picture.
Yeah.
It depends on which way the wind's blowing, which way your head is facing, whether you're
Right.
breathing out, whether you're exhaling, inhaling,
Yes.
which way your head is turned. A lot of factors can determine whether or not you're going to get one of these breath pictures.
Absolutely.
Now, one method that we use to, of course, avoid these breath pictures is when you're taking a picture in the wintertime, you want to hold the camera at arm's length, as far away as you can. Don't
Right.
worry about looking through the viewfinder. Turn your head, take a breath and hold it.
Right.
And
Right.
snap a couple pictures
Yes.
while you're holding your breath. That way you're guaranteed to not get any breath pictures.
Absolutely.
Unless someone around you is breathing.
Right. Right.
You know, which could also interfere with it. So it's one of those things where you gotta be alert. You gotta know where the other investigators are, because you don't want to pass anything off for paranormal evidence that's not really paranormal evidence.
Right.
For one, you don't want to look bad. You don't want to say, "Oh, here's a picture of a ghost," and someone's like, "Yeah, that's clearly someone's breath."
Yeah.
You don't want to pass that off, you know, and you don't want to be the one that gets your own breath caught in there and then thinks you caught something paranormal.
Yes,
You know?
yes. And it's often very easy to look at these breath pictures and to see, again, with the visual pareidolia, your mind can form images in that breath itself. So
Right.
people will often say,
Just
oh,
like
but
a
look,
cloud.
there's a face, or there's
Yeah.
a spirit, and it's not actually that at all.
No, it's just like faces in a cloud.
Yes.
Once again, we're going to take a look at another picture here. Now, this picture here is also taken in Yorktown, Virginia, and as you can see, we caught some breath in there. We clearly caught some breath. That's Linda walking up the street. and you can tell it's winter time because she's got a coat on. The camera, what it did here is it more so focused on that breath than it did anything else. You can see the trees and the grass that are up close are blurry.
Yes.
Linda that's farther away is blurry. The fence down in the corner is blurry, but the breath is in focus.
Nice and clear. Right.
So it's focusing on the breath. Now, not only is this breath, but if I'm not mistaken, I see a little orb right there by the breath that the camera is also focusing on.
Absolutely, yeah. And given that this is right up next to the water, the York River is right there. It's a good chance that it could be a water particle. We also have the trees and the bushes right there next to us, so it possibly could be a very small bug. So a lot of possibilities for those, yes.
Absolutely. Aside from breath, one thing you have to watch out for is cigarette smoke.
Yes.
If any members of your team smoke, you have to make sure that there's absolutely no smoking done during an investigation.
Right.
As this can read as a false positive in a photo. This can show up like a breath pick.
Right.
Even if you don't see the cigarette smoke, even if if you have a smoking area and there's people that are over, let's say 20 feet this way that are smoking.
Yeah.
That smoke, you may not see it in your picture. You may see it down there, but it could be coming up this way.
Yes.
And if your camera's going to be a little more sensitive than your actual eye when it comes to picking that thing up, especially at night with the flash.
Yes.
It's going to pick up things that you may not see with the bare eye.
Yeah. And smoke does have a way of lingering. It's particularly on a night that's not very windy or not very breezy, or even inside a house. We've had people come to us with photographs and they've said, well, it couldn't possibly be our cigarettes because we weren't smoking at that time. We put our cigarette out 5 minutes before. But yet you can still see this haze lingering in the house, and you can tell that it's smoke.
Right. Not very conducive to photographic evidence.
No.
So we showed you how to take a breath picture without a breath, and how to maybe avoid getting some cigarette smoke in your picture.
Right.
But one interesting thing, every once in a while you will catch a picture that has a cloudy image in it that is rather unexplainable. Yeah. Now, I'm going to show you two pictures here. Okay? Let's bring up the first one. This is a picture that was taken at Glendale National Cemetery up by Malvern Hill, where there was the last battle of the 7 Days Battle in the Civil War.
Right.
And you can see this is right outside the cemetery gate. We pulled over to take a picture, and there's nothing there. There's nothing in the picture. You don't see anything there.
Right.
Now, I want to show you another picture that was taken only seconds apart from this picture. Now, if we look at this picture, it almost looks like something is standing right there in front of the graveyard.
Right. I would describe it as a pillar of fog with very clearly defined edges that fades as it goes up. You can see the roof line of the building, the caretaker's house in the background, where the fog sort of starts fading out there. But if you look very closely at the bottom, that's what draws our interest the most about this picture.
Yeah, it almost looks like the bottom of a dress with 2 feet sticking out of it. Right?
Right.
Now, a couple things I got to say about this picture is, as you can see, it's definitely not a breath picture.
Right.
For one, when this picture was taken, it wasn't cold enough for it to be a breath picture.
No.
Okay.
And it was not humid enough for it to be any kind of fog, or there was no fog out there,
And no fog that would appear in this form.
Right. Nothing that would appear as a pillar of fog like this one did.
Now that picture, that's one of my favorites.
Yes.
Like I said, there's a handful of pictures that I really like and really think are some very good evidence.
Right.
I can't say it's definite, like I said, but some very, very possible apparitions that are caught in these pictures.
Right.
And this is one of them. And the thing is, one thing to take into consideration is the fact that this picture was taken seconds apart from the picture that had nothing in it.
Right.
So no fog is, for one, going to manifest in that shape, in that form, and then be gone within seconds.
Within seconds,
right?
Yes. That's correct. Yeah, that it's not possible that it could be that. The other natural explanation would normally be a reflection off of a surface. However, we did have a professional photography that looked at this picture, and if you notice it almost seems like it's a perfectly up and down, perfectly vertical form.
Right.
The everything else in the picture has at a slight angle.
Mm-hmm.
There is really nothing in this photograph that could have reflected that shape, the length of it, and the angle of it.
So definitely an unexplained anomaly.
Right, right.
Now on that note, I do have a question. Okay, and I think about it, and some people say this a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there's been instances, and I've had it as well, where I've taken a picture, and it's come out with hundreds of orbs.
Right.
In the picture.
Right.
And then I take another one immediately after, and there's no orbs.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, I believe that has to do with the camera flash, the way that it's capturing. It's tending to focus on those particles that are right there in its field of view, very close, and not on others. Sometimes it has to do with the amount of light in a location. There's a couple of different factors that could play into that. But just because you see orbs in one photograph doesn't mean they're in the next photograph.
Right.
Something as simple as sitting down on a dusty piece of furniture and then snapping a photograph, you'll see thousands of orbs in the picture.
And then they're gone.
And then they're gone.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. We're going to go on to the last bit of photographic evidence
Yes.
that we're going to talk about today. And this has to do with light anomalies.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a lot of stories that involve light anomalies.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
the Cohoke light, which is the ghost train that comes down the
Yes.
tracks.
Yes.
Or the people carrying the lantern that comes down the tracks, depending on which version you've heard.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also a lot of stories about battlefields. And people drive by these battlefields and they'll see lights.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe it to be muskets firing.
Right, right.
Cannons firing.
Yeah, cannonballs, yeah.
Such like that. So let's take a look at this picture right here. Now this picture was taken at Surrender Field
Yes.
in Yorktown, Virginia. As we said before, Yorktown is haunted, right?
Right.
We believe it is anyway.
Yeah.
Especially the battlefields.
Uh-huh.
Now you took this picture,
I did.
right?
I did.
What's going on here?
Well, it was right about sundown, and of course there was still a lot of light in the sky. I decided to go down and take a few photographs of Surrender Field and the surrounding battlefields. And I of course, snapped this picture right in Surrender Field and noticed something very odd in the photograph. You can see this bright little spot of light.
Right.
When you zoom in on it, it's obvious that this is not really a bug. It does not have that form with the wings and the antenna that we usually see on a photograph of a bug.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, it's also does not appear to be perfect circles of light overlapping. There's a lot going on in that little speck of light if you zoom in on it.
Now, could you see this light with the naked eye?
No.
What's to say that this isn't... I mean, is there any possible rational explanation for this that you can think of?
Well, and I suppose it very well could be a bug. I'm not exactly sure that a bug would appear like this if I took a photograph of it, because the bug would have been close enough to the camera for the flash to reflect off of it.
And it doesn't look like the Fort Mifflin bugs.
No,
That's for
not
sure.
at all. Not at all.
One other possibility I'd like to explore. When we looked at that picture from Crawford Road of the glare, is this possible that this is a sun glare?
It possibly could be, but of course you can see that the sun is really not in the picture.
Right.
If there was another very bright source of light in the picture, I would be more likely to say, okay, this is probably one of those instances
Right.
where the bright source of light is reflecting into the camera, reflecting off of internal surfaces of the camera,
Yeah.
and causing this to occur.
And sometimes you can see light, even light orbs from the sun glare.
Right, right.
You
And
know? But they're not like that. They're just like they're kind of like see-through orbs that
Yes.
aren't as foggy as the water particles, but they're
Right.
they're there, and they're that's the glare orb.
Yes,
Right.
yes. And this one also does seem to have a little bit of a contrail of light coming off the very bottom of it, as if it's in motion too, which gives me more of a reason to think that it is either something paranormal, or perhaps a bug flying through the air.
Well, that's definitely interesting, and I say that especially because of where it's taken.
Yes.
You don't see a lot of pictures that have a light in it like that.
No.
You know, and being that this one was taken at a battlefield where people reported not capturing pictures of lights like this, but actually
Right.
seeing them.
Yes.
People say they drive by Surrender Field and they'll actually see
flashes of
light,
Right.
which they think are, like I said, like gunfire.
Yes.
So it's interesting being the location where this was caught.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And I can honestly say that I've taken thousands of photographs in the fields during both day and night at Yorktown because it's so close to where I grew up.
Right.
And I've never caught anything quite like this.
Yeah, me neither. I can't say that I have either. And we've gone to a lot of battlefields
We really
throughout
have,
Virginia,
yes.
Pennsylvania,
Oh,
some
yeah.
of the surrounding states. So we've never really caught anything like that. So definitely interesting.
Right.
But we'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these pictures. If you have any input, please go ahead and comment. Let us know what you think.
Yeah.
Forgive us if we don't respond to every comment because something's messed up whenever I go to check the YouTube notifications, and I don't know. But anyway, yeah, some interesting things, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting to take a lot of pictures.
It is.
A couple pointers: make sure that you take pictures in duplicate, because when you get a picture that has something in it, it's always good to compare it to another picture.
Yeah.
One thing that's good to do if you're going to be doing an investigation in blackout mode with the lights out, using flash photography and such, go through during the daylight or with the lights on before you start this investigation and get pictures of every angle of that location where you're going to be investigating, so that if you do catch a picture at night in the dark and it looks like something's there, you can compare it to the picture
During the daytime.
daytime in the light, and see if there's any natural explanation for what you're seeing in that picture as well.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good thing to do. And keep in mind that when you take these pictures in duplicate, you want to try to keep the camera in the same exact position in both photographs. Try not to move at all. A lot of times when I take a photograph, I will hold my breath, not only because of trying to avoid breath pictures, but I hold my breath because it makes your hands a little more steady. And I will try to snap off 2 photographs before I release that breath, so that I make sure that I've not moved.
Right, that's perfect. That's good to do. And it's always good to have secondary evidence. If you catch something in a picture, it's good to try for some other evidence. If you notice it right there, you can break down and do an EVP session. Break out the EMF detector if it's not out already.
Yes, we can swing that thing around a little bit, take a look.
Yeah, see if you can capture anything else to kind of support that evidence, because that's always helpful as well. Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this edition of the Paranormal Pub Table. And we hope you'll tune in next time for our next pub table that I have no idea what it's going to be about. We'll figure it out probably about 5 minutes before we go to record it.
Right.
And just like we did with this one and all the other ones.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Until next time, I'm Jeff.
I'm Linda.
And have a good night.